Hello, dear YouTube viewers, I hope you're doing well. Okays, let's start our video. Late evening settled over the apartment, wrapping everything in stillness. Ethan sat at the dinner table, staring at the untouched plate before him. The candles he had lit out of habit flickered weakly, casting soft shadows across the room. Clara was at the gym again, her new routine that had quietly replaced their shared dinners and long conversations. The food was cold now, like everything else between them. He picked up his phone, scrolling through old photos, their trip to Italy, birthdays, anniversaries, her smile pressed against his shoulder in every picture. It all felt distant, like looking at strangers who once believed they'd never drift apart. His chest tightened. The laughter, the warmth, the small inside jokes, all replaced by silence and unread messages. He whispered to himself, "When did we stop being us?" His voice barely reached the air. Clara's obsession had begun a few months earlier. It started innocently enough, a desire to get fit again, as she called it. She joined a new gym that offered something trendy, personalized couples stretching. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. He encouraged her, told her she looked great already, but supported her enthusiasm. He bought her supplements, filled her gym bag with snacks, and even offered to join once in a while. She declined every time, saying, "It's kind of my me time. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway." Then came the name Derek, her trainer. She spoke about him more than she spoke about her husband now. "Derek says I've improved so fast. Derek says flexibility comes with trust. Derek says my form's perfect." Each mention of that name felt like a tiny sting Ethan tried to ignore. He smiled and nodded, pretending to be supportive, but the unease quietly settled into his gut like a knot that wouldn't untie. Gradually, the changes became harder to overlook. Clara started spending longer hours at the gym. She began dressing up before workouts. New perfume, new leggings, perfectly done hair. Ethan noticed, but he kept telling himself he was overthinking it. She deserved to feel confident. One night, she came home past midnight. Her cheeks were flushed, and her ponytail messy, like she'd been through a long, intense session. But as she leaned down to kiss his forehead distractedly, Ethan caught a faint trace of something unfamiliar. Cologne, not hers. It lingered in the air, sharp and heavy. He sat in silence after she went to shower, staring at the clock ticking past 1. The questions spun endlessly in his head. Why so late? Why that scent? Am I losing her? Or am I just paranoid? The next morning, he tried to talk to her, gently, carefully. "You've been different lately," he said. "You're distant, distracted. Is something going on?" Clara didn't even look up from her phone. She scoffed, her tone defensive. "Not everything's about you, Ethan. I'm just trying to be healthy." "Is that such a problem?" He sighed, trying to stay calm. "I didn't say it's a problem. I just miss you. That's all." She rolled her eyes. "You're being insecure again. You always read too much into things." The words cut deeper than she realized. In that moment, Ethan saw something he hadn't wanted to see. She wasn't just dismissing his concern. She was irritated by his presence. He stayed quiet after that, sitting back as she grabbed her gym bag and walked out without another word. The sound of the door closing echoed through the apartment, heavy and final. For the first time, Ethan didn't chase her or text to check if she was safe. He just sat there, staring at the door, wondering how a marriage could start dying so quietly that you didn't even notice it was gone. He looked at the empty chair across from him, her chair, and realized how long it had been since she'd sat there, laughing, teasing him, or even just listening. The silence around him felt louder than any argument. He reached for his phone again, scrolling to one of their wedding photos. Clara was looking up at him, eyes full of trust and joy. He could still hear her voice from that day. "Promise me we'll never stop choosing each other." He closed his eyes. Somewhere along the line, she had stopped choosing him, and he didn't know why. He whispered into the quiet apartment, "I miss my best friend," but there was no one left to hear it. Ethan had been planning their 5th wedding anniversary for weeks, trying to reignite something, anything between them. He booked a table at her favorite restaurant, the one where they'd first celebrated after moving into their apartment. He even ordered her favorite dessert ahead of time, the strawberry cheesecake she always claimed tasted like happiness. He texted her that morning, "Don't be late tonight. I've got a surprise for us." Her reply came hours later. "Oh no. I forgot it's today. We're doing late yoga stretches at the gym. Can we celebrate tomorrow?" Ethan read the message twice, the words blurring for a moment. It wasn't anger he felt first. It was something heavier, quieter. Disappointment. He typed back, "Sure, tomorrow's fine," and deleted the emojis he had added to make it sound lighter. That evening, he still went to the restaurant. Maybe out of denial, or maybe out of habit. He sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as couples filled the tables around him. The air buzzed with laughter, toasts, and love stories that still had hope. In front of him sat an untouched plate, wine glass half full. Across the table, an empty seat stared back like a ghost. He forced a smile when the waiter asked if someone would be joining him. "Not tonight," he said softly. When he finally left, the night air felt colder than it should have. He drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, mind spinning, heart aching. His route, by coincidence or fate, took him past the gym. He didn't intend to stop, but something made him slow down. The glass wall gave him a clear view inside. Bright lights, upbeat music, and there she was, Clara. She was laughing, her head tilted back, hands resting on Derek's shoulders as he leaned over her, guiding her into a stretch. Too close. Too comfortable. There was no professional distance between them, just a strange intimacy that no one else seemed to question. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his pulse thudding in his ears. He wanted to believe it was innocent, that he was imagining it, that maybe this was part of her routine. But deep down, something broke quietly inside him. He drove off before she could notice him, his eyes burning with the kind of tears men never like to admit are there. That night, sleep refused to come. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the image of her smile, one she hadn't given him in months. The next morning, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message at first, just an image loading slowly. Then a text appeared. "Thought you should see this." The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Clara and Derek sitting in his car, laughing about something, her hand resting casually on his thigh. Ethan's heart sank as he stared at it, fingers trembling. For a moment, the world seemed to go silent, everything slowing down to a painful hum. He zoomed in, trying to convince himself it wasn't her, or that maybe it was an innocent moment taken out of context. But her bracelet, the one he'd bought her for their 3rd anniversary, glinted clearly on her wrist. There was no denying it. He sat there, phone still in hand, feeling like the ground beneath him had disappeared. There wasn't rage yet, just disbelief. The kind of disbelief that feels like drowning in slow motion. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't react. He simply waited. That night, he stayed up, sitting in the living room as the clock ticked toward midnight. When the door finally opened, Clara stepped in, hair damp, gym bag slung over her shoulder. She looked startled to see him awake. "Oh, you're still up," she said, avoiding his eyes. Ethan didn't answer at first. He just held up his phone, the photo open on the screen. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. "Just tell me the truth, Clara." Her expression shifted instantly, shock, guilt, then anger. "What is this?
Who sent you that?"
"Does it matter?" he said quietly. "I just want to know if what I'm seeing is real." She scoffed, voice rising. "He's just helping me stretch, Ethan. For God's sake, are you really that jealous? If you can't handle it, maybe you should just go home." The words hit him harder than she could have known. "Go home," he repeated, the words barely a whisper. "Clara, this is my home." But she didn't soften. Her face was cold, defensive. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the woman who once promised him forever. Then, without another word, he reached for his keys. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't even look back. He just walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. Behind him, the silence was thick and final. He closed the door softly, not in anger, but in acceptance. The click echoed through the apartment, louder than any slam could have been. It was the sound of something ending, not suddenly but completely. The motel room was small and tired-looking, the kind of place that smelled faintly of dust and loneliness. A neon sign flickered outside the window, washing the room in a dull red glow that blinked like a heartbeat. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked mirror across from him. The man staring back looked unfamiliar, eyes hollow, stubble forming, shoulders slumped as if carrying years instead of hours. He had left without packing anything. Just his wallet, phone, and the clothes he was wearing. Everything else, the memories, the pain, the confusion, had been left behind with Clara's final words echoing in his mind. "If you're jealous, go home." He picked up his phone and stared at the screen. Missed calls. Unread messages. Most were from friends asking if he was okay, a few from coworkers wondering why he hadn't shown up. Clara hadn't called. Not once. That, somehow, hurt more than if she had screamed at him. He opened their old chat. The last message from her was from 2 days ago. "Don't wait up tonight. Jim might run late." He typed slowly. "I hope he's worth it." His thumb hovered over the send button for several seconds. Then he sighed and locked the screen. Sending it wouldn't change anything. It would only drag him further into the wreckage. He tossed the phone aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling as the neon light blinked against the peeling paint. Sleep didn't come, only memories. They came like ghosts, uninvited but vivid. He remembered the day he proposed. Clara standing under the old oak tree at the park, her hands trembling as he opened the ring box. She cried before he even said the words, laughing through her tears, saying yes, over and over. He remembered the way her arms felt around him that day, sure, certain, safe. Then their honeymoon, messy, spontaneous, filled with laughter. They'd gotten lost in Venice, argued about directions, and ended up sharing pizza by a canal at midnight. She'd called it the perfect mistake. He smiled faintly at the memory, but it quickly faded, replaced by the ache of what followed. He saw their first apartment, the one with walls they painted together. She chose the colors, and he handled the brushwork. They got paint on each other, laughed until they fell to the floor. The walls had once glowed with warmth, filled with photos, art, and promise. Now, those same walls, in memory and in truth, felt empty, lifeless. He whispered to the dark, how did love turn into suspicion? But no answer came. Only the hum of the neon and the faint sound of traffic outside. The next day, he met Mark, his best friend, at a cafe downtown. He almost didn't go. Part of him didn't want to talk, didn't want to say the words out loud because that would make them real. But Mark insisted. When Ethan walked in, Mark's expression shifted instantly. One look, and he understood. They ordered coffee, neither touching it for the first few minutes. Finally, Ethan began to talk, haltingly at first, then with growing emotion. He told him everything. The growing distance, the gym obsession, the photo, the confrontation, the words that broke him. Every detail spilled out like water finally bursting through a dam. Mark listened quietly, not interrupting once. When Ethan finally stopped, his voice cracked. I don't even know if she actually cheated. I just know I wasn't enough anymore. Mark leaned forward, eyes steady. Ethan, you didn't walk away because you stopped loving her. He paused. You walked away because she stopped respecting you. The words landed with weight, sharp and clean like truth often is. Ethan looked down, swallowing hard. Something in him broke, but in that breaking was also a strange sense of clarity. Respect. That was the missing piece. He realized love could survive distance, struggle, even mistakes, but not the loss of respect. Once that was gone, everything else crumbled. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the coffee machine humming in the background. Mark reached across the table and said quietly, You did the right thing, man. Sometimes walking away is the only way to stop drowning. Ethan nodded slowly, though the ache in his chest still burned. As he looked out the cafe window, watching strangers hurry by, he realized how many of them were probably carrying the same kind of invisible heartbreak, smiling through their own quiet goodbyes. That night, when he returned to the motel, The mirror didn't look quite as unfamiliar. He still looked broken, but at least now he knew why. A week passed, though for Ethan it felt like time had lost its rhythm. Days blurred together. The same dull coffee, the same restless nights, the same empty silence that echoed where Clara's voice used to be. He tried to focus on work, tried to read, tried to pretend life was slowly returning to normal. But healing never moves in a straight line. One morning, as he sat by the motel window staring at the rain streaking down the glass, his phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen, Clara. For a long moment he just stared at it, his pulse quickening. He hadn't heard from her since that night. Part of him thought he never would again. The message was short, shaky, almost desperate. "Can we talk? Please. I messed up." Ethan's chest tightened. He read it once, then again and again. Each time the words felt heavier, pulling at every piece of love and anger left inside him. His thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to reply, "Why now? Why after all this silence?" But he didn't type anything. He just set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, he realized he didn't want an apology. He wanted peace. Still, the message lingered in his mind all day, whispering doubts and memories he wasn't ready to revisit. By evening, curiosity and unfinished emotion won. He texted back just one word. "Where?" The next day, they met at a small cafe tucked away in a quiet street. The kind of place they used to visit when they first started dating. Old wooden tables, soft music, the faint smell of coffee and rain. Clara was already there, sitting by the window. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. When Ethan walked in, she looked up quickly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. He nodded and sat across from her. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Finally, she spoke. "It wasn't what you think, Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't sleep with him. I swear I didn't. I needed attention. You were always so busy, and I felt invisible. Derek was just someone who noticed me." Ethan listened without interrupting. His face stayed calm, but his heart was torn between empathy and exhaustion. He understood what loneliness could do to people. But understanding didn't make betrayal any less sharp. When she finally stopped talking, he looked at her quietly and said, "So you replaced love with validation?" She flinched, tears filling her eyes. "No, it wasn't like that. I just wanted to feel wanted again. I didn't mean to hurt you." Ethan sighed, eyes drifting to the window. Outside, rain slid down the glass, the same way their relationship had slipped away, slowly, and without either of them noticing until it was gone. "Clara," he said softly, "you could have talked to me. You could have told me you felt invisible. But instead, you made me feel like I didn't exist." Her tears spilled over. "I know. I was stupid. I ruined everything." He looked back at her, his expression steady but tired. "You didn't ruin everything, Clara. You just ended what wasn't working anymore." She reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Can't we start over? Please. I'll do anything." For a second, Ethan almost believed her. The familiarity in her voice, the way her eyes searched his face, it tugged at the old part of him that still remembered their laughter, their vows, their first dance. But it was fleeting. The trust that once held them together was gone, replaced by a scar that couldn't be undone. He leaned back in his chair, speaking softly, almost sadly. "You didn't just break my heart, Clara. You broke the part of me that believed in us." Her sobs deepened, her face hidden in her hands. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding ring. He had carried it all week, unsure why. Now he understood. He placed it gently on the table beside her coffee cup. "Keep it," he said. "Maybe one day it'll remind you of what we almost had." Then he stood up. No anger, no goodbye, just quiet certainty. As he walked toward the door, the sound of the bell above it rang softly, cutting through the hush of the cafe. He didn't look back. This time, he wasn't walking away from her, he was walking toward himself. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were parting, letting faint sunlight spill onto the wet pavement. For the first time in a long time, Ethan took a deep breath, feeling something he hadn't felt in months: relief. Months had passed since Ethan left. The chaos of Heartbreak had softened into quiet clarity. He had moved to a new city, smaller, calmer, the kind of place where mornings smelled like fresh coffee and rain on concrete. His new apartment was simple: one couch, one plant, one canvas waiting for color. He had found a new job at a small marketing firm. Nothing glamorous, but it kept him busy. Each day felt like a step toward something steadier, something his heart could finally rest in. He had also started running again, the same way he used to when life was simpler. At first, every mile felt heavy, every breath a reminder of what he'd lost. But slowly, the runs became lighter. One morning, as the sun rose over the river, Ethan realized he wasn't running from the pain anymore. He was running through it and beyond it. It was on one of those quiet evenings while walking home that he noticed a flyer pinned to a cafe wall: community art classes, beginners welcome. He smiled. Clara had once teased him about how he'd never finished the art course they'd signed up for years ago. Maybe now he thought it was time to finish it for himself. The first class was awkward. He didn't know anyone, and the smell of paint and turpentine brought back too many memories. But then there was Maya, the instructor. Warm eyes, gentle humor, and a kind of patience that made silence comfortable. She didn't ask about his past, and he didn't offer it. They painted, laughed about crooked lines and smudged colors, and something within him began to thaw. The laughter that once felt impossible returned, softly, naturally. Weeks passed. His hands began to remember the language of creation, brush strokes turning into emotions, colors into closure. For their final project, Maya asked everyone to paint something that represented a turning point. Ethan spent hours staring at the blank canvas, thinking about everything he'd been through. Then, slowly, he began to paint. A man walking down a long road at sunset, the horizon glowing gold and orange. Behind him, a small house faded into the shadows, a symbol of everything he had left behind. When he finished, Maya stood behind him, admiring it quietly. "It's beautiful," she said. "What's it called?" Ethan smiled faintly, eyes still on the canvas. "So, I walked away forever." She tilted her head. "What does it mean?" He thought for a moment before replying, voice calm and steady. "It means I finally learned when to stop chasing what hurts." That night, back in his apartment, Ethan sat at his desk. His phone buzzed. A memory he had forgotten still existed. It was Clara's old chat thread. He opened it without thinking, scrolling through months of words, apologies, anger, and silence. At the very top, there it was, the message he had written but never sent. "I hope he's worth it." For a moment, his finger hovered over the screen. Then, instead of sending it, he selected the chat and pressed delete. The phone went silent. And for the first time, his heart did too. Not in sadness, but in peace. He stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. Somewhere out there, life was still happening. People laughing, loving, healing. And for the first time, he felt part of it again. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You can't save someone who doesn't see your worth, and love, real love, never asks you to beg for respect. The next morning, sunlight spilled across his canvas, the painted road glowing beneath the orange sky. It didn't feel like an ending anymore. It felt like the beginning of something better. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel, awesome visual story.